Let's talk about what causes the actual cause of heart disease. In terms of foods, I've got buckets here so people can understand bucket one to bucket five, and then you can elaborate more on these. So, bucket one is ultra processed carbs and sugars. In that bucket includes bread, pasta, cereals. Why is that bad and why does that cause heart disease?
Yeah, so this is a big one, and what's important to understand about these things. There's two components of processed food that we need to think about. There's the highly processed carbohydrates, the sugar, the grains that are highly processed. Those are going to contribute towards insulin resistance, and then we have the highly processed fats that are oftentimes used in these products, the things like vegetable and seed oils. And vegetable and seed oils, again, there are many things they do within our body that lead to inflammation and insulin resistance. And so combining these two is especially problematic. And that's why ultra processed food is really the primary um, driver in our modern food environment of not only heart disease, but, the other metabolic diseases as well.
So, if somebody's thinking, what is an ultra processed food? Because we have different definitions now. Give an example. If you go out and about, what are you going to see that's an ultra processed carb or a sugar?
Yeah. So, what I tell people is if your grandmother or great grandmother wouldn't have recognized that as food, that's an ultra processed food that you shouldn't be eating. If it has an ingredient list, right, that you don't know, like all the things on that ingredient list aren't something that you could go out into nature and, grow yourself or pick or kill, then, that's an ultra processed food that you shouldn't be eating.
Okay, and that includes cereals because cereals is an ultra processed food, multiple ingredients. We're told it's healthy. Oatmeal is not healthy either. The next one, which is bucket two, is you mentioned industrial seed oils, but that's even when you are cooking with oils like vegetable oils, canola oil, that is going to contribute towards heart disease.
Yeah, definitely so. And again, these oils are highly inflammatory, especially when they're heated. So cooking with them becomes even more problematic. Now, understand the whole process of making these oils involves heating them and chemically treating them. And this is what makes them so toxic, so problematic, is the damage that's done to them even in the process of making them, and then that can be further amplified by cooking them and bringing them up to high temperatures. So I am not an advocate for cooking with them at all, and I'm not an advocate for having them as an ingredient in anything that we're eating.
Okay, next one is fake heart healthy foods like margarine.
Yep. And again, these things are all contain these vegetable and seed oils. And, the vegetable and seed oils are really a major part of this story, right? We came to believe, right, that lowering cholesterol was good for our heart health. And then we had these oils that lower cholesterol. And I don't deny that they lower your LDL level. It's just a question of whether that's actually good for your health and how they're doing that. And we now know, we have all of the levels of evidence, right, that we talk about in science that implicate these things in our as a contributor to poor health, right? You can look at and again, many of us are rightly critical of epidemiologic data. But, we have epidemiologic data showing these things are problematic. We have the interventional trials that are done with these vegetable and seed oils, and they've all been a failure. They don't show the benefits that they're supposed to show. They don't reduce death overall. They actually increase it in a number of the trials. And they really don't reduce the heart disease deaths when the trials look at it in a good way. There have been a couple of poorly done trials that have purported to show this, but those are, now at this point, discredited trials. And we know the biochemical mechanism by which they cause the damage. When these Alterated fats get into our mitochondria, right? The power plants of the cells. They gum up the machinery, right? Because our bodies can't process these fats properly. Saturated fats, that we get from animal products that are in nature, and even the monounsaturated fats that might be in things like olive oil. Our bodies know and can utilize these. These polyunsaturated fats were never in our environment to anywhere near the amount that they are today. Yes, there are small amounts of them, right? And even in something like um, beef, there's going to be very small amounts of these unsaturated fats. They're non-processed, right? So they haven't undergone that whole chemical processing to, and then, they're not oxidized generally when they're introduced from something like beef. But that's a whole lot different. And then the amount of them is really what is the problem. These things have gone up by 50, maybe even 100 times in our food supply over the past 50 to 70 to 100 years. And that's when we see heart disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's disease, all of these things increasing. It's interesting. I'll admit my thinking on this, has evolved over time. And, I started off by thinking it was the carbohydrates, it was the sugar that was the primary cause of the damage. I now think that it's the vegetable and seed oils that caused the damage in the first place. And then once we have that mitochondrial damage and we have the insulin resistance, now the sugar and the carbohydrates become problematic because our body can no longer process them properly.
And it's interesting to note that the ultra processed foods contains the refined carbohydrates coupled with the vegetable seed oils, which is exactly what you're talking about. I think people can get confused by that, as probably health experts are also confused which ones comes first and what's the mechanism of disease and why does disease happen. The next one is pretty easy: alcohol. That's bucket 4. As a carnivore, do you ever have alcohol?
It's pretty rare for me, to be honest. Alcohol is not beneficial to our health. And again, despite what you hear, right? You hear these studies that say, a glass of red wine a day is going to be beneficial. And it's not, right? What those studies actually show is that it might mitigate some of the damage from the food we're eating, right? It has these antioxidants that maybe can help lower some of this oxidative damage that we've been concerned about. But all in all, alcohol is not a benefit to your health. And it's interesting to me to see how many people, as they do a low carb carnivore diet, as they get healthier, they just simply lose their desire for alcohol. It just, again, probably has to do with the brain chemistry. And I certainly put myself in that category. I'm not an absolutist about it. I'll have a drink every once in a while. And when I do, it's going to be zero carb alcohol. Usually for me, it's going to be a scotch or a bourbon without, any sugar mixer in it. And a lot of times I end up not even finishing the drink. I've turned into a cheap date, you could say.
It's interesting that the level of alcohol, it affects people on a ketogenic diet. So, if you could have a drink on a normal carb diet, you probably will feel the effects much more on a ketogenic diet. Last bucket, that foods that are going to cause heart disease. So anything packaged with bad ingredients. So even things that are marketed as healthy for you is not good. Look at the pack and look at the ingredients.
Yeah, realize that those labels about them being heart healthy or other health claims, these are all advertising. In the case of the heart healthy label from the American Heart Association, that is a paid for label. The food company has paid the American Heart Association to put that on the label. So it is pure advertising. And the only thing that you can believe on a food package is that nutritional label. Now, I'll caution that even that you want to be a little suspicious of, because there are games that get played there as well. But look at the ingredient list. That's the key. And the ideal foods, they don't have an ingredient list. They don't need it. You look at it, you know what it is. It's a steak. It's, it's a vegetable, right? It's a fruit, even. You can look at it, you know what it is. It doesn't need an ingredient list. Or, maybe you're looking at something that has an ingredient list that is only combining, those things that you know what they are. I really don't believe any of these chemicals are healthy for us. There's a lot more focus on the dyes and the stuff that are going into these foods, and which ones of them may not be healthy. And in reality, I don't think any of them are healthy. And the other kind of thing that people need to sort of come to grips with is they're just not necessary, right? You can survive without these things. So why would you be introducing them into your bodies?
Do you think that a high fat diet could actually fix heart disease?
Yes, I've seen it.
In patients, you've seen it.
In patients, right? They go on the high fat, low carb, diet. They eliminate the processed food, right? And it's important what type of fat. You want to be using the natural animal fats and the minimally processed fruit fats. Coconut oil, avocado oil, olive oil. These things are okay to use as well. I prefer the animal fats, but those things are okay. And eating a lot of those fats in combination with animal protein, I've seen it improve heart disease. So I don't have to really theorize about it. I've seen it, and I know it helps with heart disease.
Okay, I like to play a game here. I'm going to give you some foods, and you tell me, can you eat as much of this as you want until you feel satiated? And that's going to help someone fix their heart disease. First one, beef.
Definitely so.
How about eggs?
Definitely so.
How many can you eat a day? How many eggs?
I don't know that there's a limit. I do, I have become a little bit more cautious, and I talk to people about the source of the eggs, right? Because you do have to be concerned about what that chicken is being fed. And if they're being fed a bunch of corn and soy, that can translate to more of these polyunsaturated fatty acids in the egg. Now, again, I don't know that the polyunsaturated fatty acids in that situation are as damaging and as concerning as they are in the bottle of vegetable and seed oil, but I have become a little bit more cautious about, the source of your eggs. I think if you have well-sourced eggs, the chickens are truly eating what they're supposed to be eating out there in the pasture. You can eat as many of them as you want. If you're not sure about the source of your eggs and what the chicken was eating, you might want to, be a little bit more careful. That doesn't mean don't eat eggs, just means maybe you don't want to do a dozen a day of those types of eggs.
So if I have pasture raised eggs, as I do, highest quality, I have 6 in the morning. My husband has a dozen. Totally fine. Totally fine.
Totally fine.
This is going to be hilarious. People are going to think you guys are crazy for saying that. But if they can understand that the saturated fat and the good fat is good for you, it's going to fix your heart and fix heart disease, they'll understand that eggs, beef, and lamb is the next one, is good for you. Is lamb good?
Yeah, lamb is excellent. Lamb, in many ways, might even be better than beef. And I know some people, that might trigger them a little bit. But lamb, actually, when you look again at that kind of fatty, the profile of their fat, it probably has some advantages over beef, especially. The other thing is that most lamb, right, is grass fed, grass finished. We haven't really gotten into grain finishing lamb. They haven't figured out how to ruin lamb quite yet, as they have with, some beef. So lamb is a great food to be eating.
I didn't know that. I'm going to eat more lamb than if it's kind of all grass fed because I currently have grain fed beef. It's delicious, but if I can get grass fed lamb and it's at the same price or even cheaper than beef. What do you think about? So we spoke about butter. Does butter unclog the arteries?
So I don't know that we can say that butter unclogs the arteries, right? Butter has the fats that aren't going to clog the arteries. And if you're substituting those for the fats that do clog the arteries, indirectly, there can be I guess, an unclogging effect, right? Some of it is what you're taking away as much as what you're eating.
I love asking these questions because you're very on point and diplomatic. In a way, it does unclog the arteries, but you have to be careful to say it doesn't directly. But if you're not having these other fats, it is going to help have good, healthy arteries. Okay, last few raw milk, good or bad for heart disease?
Yeah, I think raw milk is great for our overall health, and I have no concerns about it when it comes to heart disease.
Wow, raw cheese,
Raw cheese, great as well. Yeah.
honey.
So honey, I think, is going to be situational. If you're not insulin resistant, if you're active, I think honey can be incorporated into the diet safely. The problem is that most people are insulin resistant to some degree, and therefore they are going to, honey, which is sugar, is going to be problematic for them. But I think if you are, like I said, if you're insulin sensitive, you're active, you have good muscle mass, and you want to incorporate some type of sugar, I think raw honey is one of the best types of sugar that we can incorporate into the diet.
Okay, any limit on salt if somebody wants to fix heart disease?
If it's real salt, there's no limit. If it's processed salt, that's where it becomes problematic. So, the reason that salt has become associated with high blood pressure and heart disease is the vast majority of salt, at least in the Western diet, comes from processed food. So it really became a marker for processed food. The unprocessed, good sea salt or good Himalayan salt, whatever it might be, that is not problematic, and people shouldn't limit that in any way.